Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for being here today. My name is Halima, and I'll be your MC for this program. I am so excited for this tonight. We at PAC have been wanting to do something like this for a while because we recognize the importance of learning our financial power. We are gathered for an important conversation today that connects finance, ethics, and civic engagement, looking at how our financial choices and awareness can shape not only our personal futures, but also broader economic and social systems. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Alae Jaber is a wealth management certified professional with over 17 years of experience in the financial service industry. In his work with a global banking institution, he analyzes market and economic data, events, and trends to help clients make informed decisions and adjust their investment portfolios. He brings deep expertise across investment, commercial, business, retail, and private banking services. Alae holds an MBA from Rutgers University with a specialization in finance and accounting, and has dedicated his career to helping individuals strengthen their financial literacy and money management skills to achieve their long-term goals. And we are so lucky to have you here today, Alae. And my name is Halima Twam. I'm the Civic Engagement and Advocacy Manager at the Palestinian American Community Center. But before we continue, a brief disclaimer. Today's speaker, Alae Jaber, is participating in a personal capacity and is representing himself, not his employer or any affiliated institution. The information shared during the session is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. Alae is not providing financial planning or personalized investment recommendations, and nothing shared today should be interpreted as such. We are going to just talk to you about how you can be in control of your own money. So we'll just do a brief event format overview so that everyone is aware of what to expect for the duration of the event. And so now to outline the structure of today's session, Alae's presentation will be divided into 3 sessions. First, he will speak about ethical investing and provide a practical tutorial on how investment decisions can align with values and long-term financial goals. The tutorial is my favorite part. Then we will have a brief Q&A after. Second, we will move into a discussion on boycotting, examining how consumer choices can influence markets and corporate behavior. Third, we will explore supporting advocacy groups, focusing on how financial contributions and engagement can support broader causes and community initiatives. And all of this will be spoken about in the terms of the current legal structure that we are in. After each session, there will be a Q&A, so please feel free to write your questions in the chat, and we will keep track of them. And we ask that questions be respectful, focused, and relevant to the section being discussed so that we can keep the conversation productive and engaging for everyone. So with that said, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Alae Jaber.
Thank you, Halima. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد. So first of all, I want to thank everybody today for taking time to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. Obviously, you could be doing a lot of things with your night. I know the Knicks are playing tonight, and everyone's super excited about New York finally making it hopefully to the promised land in a few more games. So I promise I'll be thorough. I promise that I'll make sure that you find a lot of value in today's session, and I'll answer hopefully any and all questions that you have. The main purpose why Halima, the PAC, and myself even thought of this as a really important session to discuss is primarily because we live in the West, and we sometimes contemplate what kind of agency do we have as Muslims or Arabs or people of conscience that live in the heart of empire. And when we think about that, we really have to use every tool at our disposal in order to impact change. And one of the things that I realized working in this industry is the most impactful change you can make is when you make consumer behavioral changes that forces the top level CEOs to study the data and make adjustments accordingly. So boycotting is one of those things that once it catches traction, market analysts take notice and they start to think about how they're going to either capitulate and formulate a new narrative around how they're hearing us as consumers, or they'll try to go back to the drawing board and forcefully change their standards to abide by ethical practices. So first, I'd like to tell you that my role in this is to hopefully break this down into three different categories, and I'm going to share my screen in a couple of minutes. But the first is ethical investing. So for your young professionals or your entrepreneurs, anybody who has spare funds and wants to participate in these open markets, conscientious consumption, which is every single person out here has to eat, has to put gas, has to pay rent, has to pay their electric bills, utilizes technology on a day-to-day basis. And the last one is your economic empowerment, is how you can have some skin in the game and contribute to institutions that are trying to help uplift our causes. So first, I'd also like to disclose that what I'm about to share with you today is my opinion alone. I personally, I work with American Muslims for Palestine as the vice chairman of the New Jersey chapter. So the viewpoints that you're about to see today are mine and mine alone. They don't represent the PAC, they don't represent AMP, they don't represent the institution I work for. But I did want to educate everybody about, like I said, the agency that you hold, and sometimes need to harness. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can follow along with the program. Okay, Halima, can you just confirm that you could see my screen?
Yes. Yes, we're good now.
Okay, fantastic. Good. Alhamdulillah. So what we want to do today is think about turning your money into power. So as I said earlier, we live in the West, and sometimes we might feel like, what can we do to help improve the situation for our brothers and sisters that are being oppressed? And turning your money into power is one of the key components that you could think about. So first and foremost, I'm going to start talking about ethical investing. I'm also going to show you an example of how you can take control of your own assets and understand how this plays into the large scheme of things. So one thing that you'll notice is there's a lot of billionaires that are very politically active nowadays. Some of them that come to mind are the Ellison family, who recently purchased TikTok and CBS. Obviously Elon Musk purchased Twitter a few years ago. So these are clearly moves from the billionaires to try to control narratives. Jeff Bezos also purchased the New York Post a couple of years ago as well. And if anybody knows anything about these media companies, a lot of them are not really money makers. They don't really make a lot of money. They actually are, pretty tight on the budget, and they also are hefty losers on the balance sheet. But these billionaires understand that controlling the narrative is key to helping them get away with what they want and influence society, and more than anything, influence our politicians on Capitol Hill to provide policies and legal formats that help them pretty much stick to the status quo, hoard more wealth, and have more power overall. So you as the consumer, or as even the investor, can participate in how you want to share in it and how you want to maintain your own autonomy over how your investments are constructed. But in order to do so, we should understand what are the investment outlets that we have available to us. So the first one is a self-directed investment account. So a self-directed investment account, anyone can open. You simply go online to your bank or broker and open up an account in your name. It's as simple as that. And then you physically get to, trade or purchase or sell whatever investments you want to carry in your portfolio. The second one, you have a little less autonomy with. It's corporate retirement and investment plans. That comes in the form of a 401k. Unfortunately, when it comes to a 401k, as a participant, you don't really have a say in what you can invest in and what you can't invest in, other than the menu that's provided to you by your employer. So your employer will create a 401k program and come up with about 15 to 20 funds Again, I'll show you some example of what of those funds are, and they'll tell you, every week or 2 weeks, we're gonna take some money out of your paycheck. We're gonna put it into this 401k. They may give you a match as a benefit for working for that corporation, but essentially you don't get to decide what those funds are invested in, or funds that maybe align more with your ethical standards. But nonetheless, there is a plan, and there's also a way to have more control in this sphere. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later on. The third is small business investing. So our community is very well known for opening up small businesses. One of the things that they may or may not be comfortable with is understanding the tax advantages of opening retirement plans that are in the small business name. I'll give you some examples, like a SEP IRA, or a individual, or what's called a solo 401k. So let's say, for example, you're an owner of a small business like a plumbing company, and you employ yourself, and you employ three other people. You can open up a small SEP IRA to help yourself save for retirement and still get the benefits of some tax deductions. And last but not least, you have public sector retirement plans. So if you work in the public sector, like for the government, the state, or the federal agencies, they typically offer you something called a pension plan, where essentially you work for a certain amount of years, and at the end of those years, you're entitled to some type of income stream without necessarily working. But you do have some autonomy, especially when you're talking about working for agencies that have unions, or agencies that have strong labor agreements. And I'll talk about that as well. But for now, I just want to keep it moving, so I give you guys an opportunity to ask questions.
Alae,
So, yeah,
briefly, would you mind expanding into full presentation view, so that we would be off to the side, and the full screen would be the presentation itself?
sure.
Awesome, thank you. Doing great.
Sorry, I just got to move this a bit. No. Give me 1 second. I haven't done this since college, so you guys are going to have to bear with me while I figure out where the presentation mode is. I remember it being somewhere here.
It's on the bottom right.
This one? Did I miss it, Halima?
No.
Oh, here it is, slideshow. Okay. Okay, I think we should be okay now. It's just loading. Give it a second.
Thank you. Thank you for adjusting your screen for us.
Yeah, no problem. It's just a little embarrassing. Now you guys know how slow my computer is.
No, it's fine.
I'm going to blame your programs.
And thank you, everyone, for your patience as we work on this technical issue.
Okay.
Yep, there it is. Thank you so much.
No problem. So, self-directed investing, opening up an individual account. I'm going to show you how to use some tools in order to filter through companies that have affiliation with the apartheid state or have Zionist ownership. You could directly review mutual funds with their fact sheets to see if they're halal or Sharia compliant. There are some funds that I'll also share with you that you can easily locate that are halal. And just to be clear, just because they're halal and or Sharia compliant does not necessarily mean that they participate in boycott and divestment. So I want to clarify that distinction, because sometimes you'll go into a Sharia compliant fund that'll own a company like Google, and you'll think to yourself, wait a minute, I thought Google's on the boycott list. A Sharia compliant just means specifically that they meet the standards of what a compliant company is when it comes to how much debt they take on. And then the fourth option is investing in real tangible assets like gold, silver, real estate, and small businesses, so private investments. Okay. Corporate retirement investing. So your 401k, again, is administered by your company and it's held at a custodian. So you might go to your 401k and you'll, again, get to select which funds you participate in. And they're kind of prepackaged in a prepackaged menu format. So there's a couple of options you could do when it comes to how to take control of your 401k. Number one is you can get together with a lot of affinity groups within your corporation, depending on how big or small it is, and you could solicit your HR to add in funds that align with your values. For example, if you want a Sharia compliant ETF or mutual fund, you would get together with at least, let's just say 3 or 4 affinity groups that represent a big, a cohort of employees, and you would just simply petition your HR representative to consider adding certain funds that, again, align with your principles and values. That's one way you can impact actually the entire company from having the options of new funds that maybe align with what we're trying to accomplish. Nothing wrong with that. Number two, slightly different. I would definitely suggest you talking to a financial professional if you want to take advantage of this one, but it's called initiating an indirect rollover. So every single year, once a year, you have the ability to do something called an indirect rollover, which is essentially you withdrawing the money out of your 401k and depositing it into your own self-directed IRA. Now, you're only allowed to do this once a year, so you might want to take a lump sum. As long as you move it from your 401k to an IRA, there are no tax consequences. When it comes to pensions, again, not a lot of corporations offer pensions anymore, but for those that do, the pension has corporate fund trustees that need to be contacted, a lot like how you would solicit HR to change the 401k plan. Typically, you have to solicit those trustees, collectively through organization in order to make sure that they're aware of some of the values that you guys want to see represented in your investments, such as maybe avoiding companies that invest in immigration camps or surveillance like Palantir. So I'm just showing you a sample like 401k statement. They'll typically give you a list of all of the funds that they have available that you can choose from. So I'm gonna, just take this one fund called, Goldman Sachs SMCPV Institutional, and I'm gonna show you how to look at it when it comes to screening it. We'll get back to that in a moment. Small businesses, again, you could create your own 401k. This is really important as well because as a small business owner, you have full autonomy as to how you want to participate in the market. You essentially will contact either ADP or whoever handles your payroll. You can also contact some of the bigger companies like Fidelity, JP Morgan, Vanguard. They all have a platform that you can use as a as a retirement package for you, for your company, for you, or for your employees, or all of them. Opening up a SEP IRA is also a really good idea if you're a really small business owner. Usually if you have like a single member LLC, or if you have a few employees that are part-time, it's very easy to open up a SEP IRA and really get some big tax benefits. But again, I would suggest consulting with an accountant regarding whether or not it's right for you. Public sector retirement funds. Again, I'm going to give a quick shout out to a campaign that's happening here in New Jersey called Break the Bonds in New Jersey. So a lot of these pensions that are held by the public sector, like the state of New Jersey, they have a committee that pretty much runs the entire investment portfolio of the state of New Jersey. Part of that is the pension plan for cops, for teachers, and for administrators that work for the state. Now, what you can do is, again, you can join this particular campaign, but I would highly recommend familiarizing yourself, if you are a public sector employee, to kind of talk to your teachers union, talk to your police union, whoever it is that you have a little bit of influence over, to help join a campaign. That way you can convince the state comptroller to divest from Israel's bonds that we currently hold in New Jersey. But essentially, within the public sector, again, it's all about organizing and making sure you're aware of where it is rather than letting it go by the wayside. So I'm going to stop here for a second, not to take questions just yet, but simply to show you an example of what it looks like to actually, look through the investment platform to see, what's what, right? So I said earlier, Goldman Sachs, small cap fund. So as soon as you Google it, again, you'd have to look at what's available in your portfolio. And it takes you directly to their website. And as soon as you get to the landing page, almost all of them are going to look very, very, very similar. The key component is looking at this section right here, which is overview, data, performance, allocation, and management. When you look at the data, most of the time, they'll typically offer, some of the holdings that they have. I'm just going to scroll down a little to see if they offer it here. This is good. So it says here, allocations, top 10 holdings, right? So here they kind of show you what's being held in this fund, or at least the top 10 holdings, right? Some of them are very, very granular. Like I went to Vanguard earlier, and I did the same thing, which is I looked up some of their funds, and these are the symbols that they have. But again, you could just type in whatever the name is. Let's just call, international, and it'll start pulling up all the international funds. So here, this one, International Core Stock Fund. When I open it up, same thing. You'll see overview, performance, portfolio. So I'm just going to go over to the portfolio, and it'll list out for me all the different holdings that it has. Now, Vanguard happens to list every single one of them. So everything that's owned in this portfolio, all 97 companies, are all listed here. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, well, I'm not going to go through all this, and I'm not going to go page by page to figure it out. It's no problem. What I also did was, to make things a little bit easier, is you could just simply Google the top Israeli companies in the U.S. stock market. So if you hit Google, just go to Google and you just put Israeli companies publicly traded. I personally really like this website. It's called Stock Analysis, and it gives you a list of every single company that's publicly traded in the U.S. stock market that's based in Israel. So you might not recognize a lot of them, but I'll just tell you some of the most, commonly known ones. Is this one, Zim? It's a shipping company. Elbit Systems, a lot of people know it as a weapons manufacturer. Teva is a pretty large pharmaceutical company. But all you essentially need to do is, once you find out the fund that you want to invest in, you could just type in the symbol. So in this case, I'm going to look for Elbit Systems because I don't want any weapons. Sorry, give me 1 second. It just might be too much information for the computer. Here we go. Halima, you can still see my screen? I have to check in with you every now and then.
That's what I'm here for.
All right, good. All right, I'm really sorry, guys. It should have... give me 1 second. I think I know what happened. It typed it like 10 times. All right, so in any case, I apologize. It should show up here. So in this, section here, you could just type in the symbol, which is ESLT, and it'll show you if it's in this fund at all. And again, you could go through any of these companies that are, it's very easy to find. Again, it's not a lot of companies, but this is an easy first step to figuring out, how you could divest and build a portfolio that avoids any companies that are tied to the Israeli regime or the Israeli state.
So
Um,
to be clear, you would go to the stockanalysis.com, you would type in the symbol. So you go through your investment portfolios through your job. You get like here's all the things that you're investing in, and then you could take each one of the stocks that are listed and look it up, and whether it be invested in war, environmental impact, any type of apartheid as a whole, you can go in and you can look at each stock and see through stockanalysis.com where your money is going. So you would use the find a holding and it would tell you more about where exactly that's directly contributing to.
Correct. Absolutely. So that's an easy way to do it. You could do it for any company for that matter. You could do it for any of the funds. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to, again, investing, if you're, I told you earlier also that I'll show you, like, if you want to stay closer to safety, I would at least start with the Sharia compliant ones. And you could just go to this website here called Halal Wallet. Halal Wallet just kind of gives you a good list of um, all of the um, all of the ETFs that are available. I'll just put here. And then you can see a list of all the halal ETFs that are available for you to buy. It's probably the simplest way to start. A lot of these funds have been around for a long time. Their returns are pretty solid compared to the standard investments. And I would say if you want to keep it very, very, very simple, especially in the beginning of your career where maybe you're only investing $1,000 to $5,000 and you're kind of waiting from there, I would just start with something very simple and just buy like a halal ETF for now. And inshallah, in the future, someone can help you. Like I said, you could contact a financial advisor like myself, and I'll happily, go over your portfolio and really dive much deeper into it. But
Now,
that's a very good baseline to start.
if I work at a company and I've realized that there are certain stocks that is on the menu that I don't want to be investing my 401k into. So like I work for a global company and I've followed your steps. I've looked through the different stocks and I've decided that okay, 3 out of 7 of these I want to no longer invest in. I reach out to HR. I let them know that I don't want these 3 on my menu. Can I suggest stocks that I would like on the menu?
No. So again, that's more personalized and customized. But that's why I said the easier default would be to go to the halal ETFs because chances are, at the very least, they'll avoid stuff like gambling, alcohol, things that you don't want anything to do with. And then again, once you start to grow your portfolio, hopefully, again, it's on us. It's incumbent on us to kind of advance our causes to advocate that these halal funds also take into consideration companies that are complicit in genocide, like making sure again they don't own Palantir or they stay away from companies like Amazon or I don't know, Oracle is another big one, right? Again, I mentioned earlier the Ellison family who bought up all these conglomerate, media companies. Their original, wealth is generated through Oracle. Again, now personally, you probably don't use Oracle, but your company does, or you might be a chief technology officer in your company, and now you might be able to make some decisions. The more you're aware of these things, of course, it has to fit your company's objectives. And I understand when you're making decisions at that level, it might not be as black and white, but at the very least, you should make yourself aware of who owns these companies and what are they using the proceeds of their, of their profits to do, right? Because essentially they're spending tons and tons of money, and how are they earning it other than by leveraging our labor and our investment dollars and our consumption habits.
Absolutely. And thank you a lot for that insightful overview of ethical investing. We'll now open the floor to we'll do a quick 5-minute Q&A on the first part of that presentation.
For someone, okay, you want to read it and I'll.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
For someone who's getting started, what's the simplest way to decide how much to contribute a 401k each paycheck?
That's a great question. I would say the simplest way to decide is if your company offers a match of any type, take whatever their match is. So if you go to a company and they say, we do a 5% match, at the very minimum, contribute 5% because you're putting 5% from your pocket, but your company is giving you 5% for free from their pocket. So essentially, you're getting double the money right from the door just for participating in that benefit. That's a great first question. It's an easy one.
Awesome. And to be and to reiterate what you were saying in the beginning, many times people will start a job and there are two options. Either they can control what they're investing in or they let the company invest for them. Your recommendation is to make sure that you are checking the box that says I want to choose from a menu, that I'm going to be picking each of those stocks myself from what you have available. And if you are already, let's say, been working with a company for over 2 decades and you've been letting your company invest, how would you then go and say, like, I would like to actually now be in control of my own investments versus having the company invest for me?
So also a good question. So what I said earlier in the beginning, or at least in the middle of the presentation, is you could do something called an indirect rollover. So let's say I've been at my company for 10 years. I have $200,000 in my 401k, and great, they have a lot of funds, but I want to get very granular about how it's invested. I'm allowed to withdraw up to the entire amount, the full $200,000. The company will pay it to me, but I have to, within 60 days, deposit it into an IRA to avoid taxes. That's why I was saying, if you're going to do that strategy, please, please, please consult with a financial advisor to make sure you do it correctly. Otherwise, you'll be taxed and penalized very heavily. Now,
Yeah,
again,
we don't want that.
you're taking control, so you get to pick again when you deposit it into a self-directed IRA. Now you get to pick exactly whatever you want. Once it's in a self-directed account, it's completely open architecture. You could put it all in cash. You could put it all in gold. You could put it in whatever you want. One stock, 10 stocks, 50 stocks. Totally up to you. I
You
wouldn't
can
do it alone. I wouldn't do it alone because it is a difficult task to do. But nonetheless, there are options out there for you to do it.
and
And
you
that
can
would
work
be the
with an
way.
ethical investor such as yourself to figure out which bonds are the best or stocks are the best to invest in and grow your money
Yeah,
without investing in apartheid or any other values that you hold, like
sure.
environmental issues. There's another question in the chat that's asking that can you please explain what an ETF is?
Absolutely. So an ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. Exchange Traded Fund is a pool of investments. I'm gonna very quickly share my screen one more time and just show you an example of what an ETF is and what it looks like. That way, when you see it, you'll get very easily, like for example, SPUS. Right? Let's look at what SPUS is. So when you invest in the ETF, Exchange Traded Fund SPUS ETF, you could look at the holdings, right? So here, it'll tell us the holdings. So this is the fund company. Now you own all of these companies in one form. So for example, you have $1,000. The current price of SPUF is, I didn't catch it, but I think it's here somewhere. Nope. One second. Did anybody catch it by any chance? How much it was? All right, let's see it. Price. So the SPUS price right now is about $57 per share. So for $57 of one share of SPUS, you'll have exposure to all of these companies. So this has about, I'm going to assume at the very minimum, 50 companies. There should be here somewhere. It says how many holdings there are. It'll be written somewhere here. It'll say how many holdings there are in the fund. But essentially, you now have invested your $57, and it gets you a portion of all of these companies that they own. So obviously, owning more shares means you own more of these companies. You don't own it directly, you own it through this fund. I hope I answered the question. If you want me to go into more detail, I'm happy to do so. But anytime you do invest, that's essentially what you're doing. You're buying a share in a pool of investments. Imagine, like, for example, you go to buy a condo, right? And then it's one condo out of 100, right? And you own that one condo. So you own a share in the building. You don't own the building, you own a share in the building.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then for someone new to investing, what's the minimum amount needed to start building a diversified portfolio?
Good question. I would say these sound like Chat GPT questions. If I'm being honest, I'm just joking. Uh, the minimum I would say is you want to first have an emergency savings account. So most rule of thumb is keep at least 3 months, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in cash. Don't invest that. Anything above you invest it, I would say at least $1,000. So let's say your monthly bills come out to $2,500. You want to have at least 7,500 to 15,000 just sitting in a savings account, accessible in case an emergency happens. Anything above that, you want to start investing it into something, depending on how old you are and whatnot, whether it's going to be aggressive or moderate or whatever.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. There will be another opportunity to ask questions after the next portion of your presentation. Thank you for asking those questions, and for everyone watching in the audience. Really, there is no shame in asking any questions that you may have. We will answer them to the best of our abilities, and as however simple or complicated they may be. And the whole point of this is to stigmatize and break down any kind of insecurities that we have about investing and money, and again, making sure that we are working on our collective power to really shift markets through our buying power and invest in what is aligned to our values. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and move to the second portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Halima. So I spoke about how you invest your money when you have surplus funds, right? That's probably a select few of people that obviously are, maybe in their career, like, third year and up, they have a little bit of extra cash on hand. But, no matter what, where you are, whether you're a teenager or a parent or, a senior, you're always consuming. So conscientious spending is, I would argue, more important than anything, because where we spend our money is extremely important. You have to understand that the U.S. culture is geared and conditioned around maximum consumerism. All the research indicates that anything that can get people to spend money as quickly and conveniently as possible, that's where they're putting their time, effort, and energy into. And obviously, over decades, that's led to pretty disastrous, economies, or I would say balance sheets for the average American, right? So right now, the average American household has about $11,500 of credit card debt, paying about 21.5% interest. The total credit card debt right now is about $1.4 trillion, right? Everywhere you go, there's marketing all in your face, just trying to get you to buy, right? Whether you're on your phone, on social media, or watching YouTube, there's commercials everywhere, and that's all by design, right? Now, it's incumbent on us as the consumer to be conscious spenders, because that money, at the end of the day, gets funneled into the pockets of the very billionaires and Zionists, to be quite frank, that are going to utilize that money to harm you in the long run, right? They have no problem. I mean, if you guys paid attention to the elections yesterday, in Thomas Massey in Kentucky, they spent over $30 million in a primary race. It's the most expensive primary in U.S. history, and it was backed by three Zionist billionaires: an oil billionaire named Singer, a casino billionaire named Edelson, and I even forgot the last one. But nonetheless, it was very well known, right? And I try to give you guys the tools just to make it as easy as possible to have apps available to just not purchase things that are gonna essentially make its way to these billionaires that will eventually harm you or harm the community that you love and come from, right? So I listed four different ones here. They're all available on the app stores. Boycat is, one of the funner ones because it has a lot of different tools at its disposal as well. Like it has, you just simply scan your, scan the barcode of whatever you're gonna buy, and it just simply tells you it's good or not good. And I really like it because it's really fun, and they have other products like VPN. If anybody knows, like virtual private networks are almost 90% predominantly owned by Israeli companies, and they went out and created their own. So again, the tools are out there. You just have to make it a conscious effort to look for it. No thanks is really nice because, to my understanding, it's Palestinian, backed, meaning the coder or the owner is Palestinian, and they also give you alternatives. So you'll scan. Let's just say you scan Coca-Cola. It'll say no thanks, and it'll give you like four different alternatives to buy that are not on the boycott list. And then I added the last one, which is called Bilzemish, and it's in Arabic default for anybody out there that their first language is in Arabic. This is just a simple example. I use again Boycat because it's really cool. It's just you scan it, it'll tell you non-compliant, or you scan it and it tells you that it's fine, it's compliant. You can also type in the name of the brand that you're looking for. If you can't find it, you could submit to them to, hey, can you please look to see if this brand is, and then it'll probably show up a little while. They do updates like once a month on all the brands that are available out there. You have to understand the connection and correlation. Again, it's fairly simple. Consumer behavior drives how these companies function, and how they decide to market stuff. And how, I mean, I don't know if anybody has noticed, but over the past, I would say maybe 5 years, there's been a big microscope on marketing towards Muslims, and specifically Muslim women, right? Just to be very blunt, most marketing is geared already towards women, and obviously they're going to take that information that they have through analytics and try to use it to essentially influence. I would call it manipulate us into consuming in a state of being almost like being a zombie. Just buy whatever is convenient. Just buy whatever's in front of you because it's easy, it's accessible, versus doing a little research as to where you're spending your money. So remember, the all these products come from our labor at the end of the day, and that's essentially being leveraged, and that power is building on one side of the equation towards Zionists, or let's just say white nationalists, or people that are just not looking to really help our community as much. So I think it is one of the simple agencies that we have as Muslims, and I would argue it's probably one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us with, saying, everybody that's being harmed right now in either the Middle East or Africa or any of these countries that are under bombardment, their test is very obvious. Their test is they have to have patience for what's happening in front of them. I'm a lot more fearful of what our test will be when we are questioned, like, okay, you had safety, you had comfort, you had wealth. What exactly did you do with it? Did you take it for granted, or were you consciously looking towards how you're going to utilize it to leverage that and weaponize your wealth to help the people that are oppressed? And that's really the core of why I really enjoy doing what I'm doing. Again, I'm going to stop here because we're getting towards the end of the last phase of ours, which is the shortest. But maybe Halima, if you want to open it up to some more questions about anything on the boycott list, or how to boycott.
Absolutely. And I think there were some questions. There was another question before we ended the last session.
Mm-hmm.
But before I get into that question, I just, the way that this whole conversation was framed to me, or what we're really fighting as a collective intersectionally, is that as a country, it's the working class that is who's funneling money into these war zones, and then it is those countries and those places that are, I'm sorry, I think you guys can hear my dog crying. It is those countries that are then putting that money back into the global elite, and then the global elite is controlling consumerism and our politics and really controlling the middle class, which is why it's so important and why we're having this conversation in the first place, that we are being very mindful of our investing and how we're spending, because it's our way of breaking away from the global elite and its control over us. And without us and without our managing of our money and our labor and our time, we continue to feed the global elite by pushing things into a pocket that's just being moved into a different pocket. So that's why we're all here today. And then the question that was being asked is, I'm not sure if this is relevant, but how do endowments fit into this?
That's a great question. First of all, we refer to the global elite as the Epstein class, just for clarification. That's the new terminology these days. So don't help fund the Epstein class. As far as endowments go, endowments are typically, housed by nonprofits. So like a lot of big, institutional investments, or let's just say people that want to have a nonprofit or a charity organization will put their money towards endowments. A lot of colleges and private universities also offset some of the costs of their tuition through endowments. So essentially, an endowment is the same thing as an investment vehicle that is managed by a nonprofit of some sort. So anybody can, be the trustee of the endowment, but essentially the endowment's purpose is going to go towards something nonprofit related. So how do they fit in? So endowments also need to invest. They can invest in real estate. A lot of them invest in stocks. Um, when you look at like some of the biggest endowments, they're owned by universities, Columbia, Harvard. They have multi-billion-dollar endowments, and this is why we've seen a lot of college campuses essentially say that they want to divest within those endowments, because they understand that because these endowments are like they have to be publicly made available, like what exactly does it own. A lot of the students organize and the faculty organizes because they know that, hey, our university is complicit in XYZ genocide, or immigrant policies, or whatever the case may be. So endowments are very important. I would definitely say it's more in the academia world, because again, that's where you find most of the endowments. But a private endowment, there's really not much you can do if the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, which is an endowment, decides that they want to buy Palantir. There's really, again, not much we can do other than market it and call it out for what it is. But we most likely won't even have that much access to it versus a university that has to publicly disclose what they own. So I hope that answers that question. What other question was there? I
Great
think there was
question.
another.
Those are the two that I see for right now. And yeah, thank you for that overview. I think that, and then the other question is, oh, what do you say to people who say, what difference can I make?
That's a good one. I mean, I know a lot of the times, people feel like their individual effort is drowned out in a sea of a lot of things happening and a lot of things going on. The first thing I would say is, again, I'm gonna talk personally because I do have a lot of conviction in my faith, and I can only do what is within my control first and foremost. So when I go out every day, I have to make a conscious effort. Like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me with, this money that I'm about to use to fill up my gas. Am I going to just go to the nearest gas station so I can go in and out very quickly? Or am I going to make sure I'm very familiar and plan my day around understanding that this gas station is on the boycott list. I'm going to avoid them. And there's a lot of, and again, you have to remind yourself, there are a lot of alternatives. There are alternatives for everything. There's no one company or one industry that is completely dominated by Zionists. There's always a alternative. It's all a matter of, do you want to put in the effort that it takes to make sure your money is not going to fund this stuff. So I would say every single person, whether you're a teenager and again your parents give you an allowance and you want to go hang out and get coffee, I mean, again, it's a personal choice. Are you going to go to Starbucks and get a coffee, or are you going to go somewhere much better, like Yafa or any of these great coffee places that we have in Patterson, and get their coffee. Again, it's a conscious effort. I would say every single one, no matter how small or how big it is. Eventually, I will say, if you educate and train yourself well enough, you got to think one day I will be in a position of power after a few years of experience and getting into the corporate or getting into the professional world. You will have a lot more agency to influence a lot more than just your small world of yourself. You might influence a team, you might influence an entire sector. You could be an executive director for a company where 1,000 people are essentially answering to you, and it's your choices that are going to determine whether the lunch that you bring for a huge conference is going to be Zionist owned or not. So I would say you have to start with the very simple baby steps.
You mentioned most VPNs are owned by Zionists. I didn't catch what you said about other options. Could you repeat that point?
Yeah, so virtual private networks, again, it's one of those few, I would say, sectors that are predominantly owned by Zionists. And if you think about that for a second, that's actually really like you got to think that's very purposeful. Number one, right? They are trying to wrap their hands around getting as much of your information as possible through essentially, networks of information. That's how they're going to be able to build the Palantirs and all these surveillance companies, is having these networks to tap into, backdoor through, whatever the case is. Like I said, Boycat, as it's an app that offers, like I said, it offers VPN services as well as an app that, it's an app that helps you like boycott specific companies. So what I was saying was, if you are going to use a VPN, make sure you're very, very aware of, if it's Zionist owned, because that's one of the sectors that is heavily penetrated by Zionist companies.
Love this next question. We have two more, and then we'll go to the third section. I have another opportunity to ask more questions after the third section, and then we'll talk about ways to continue engagement with you and other ways to continue our advocacy work. But this next question is, what is a good starting point for stocks? I'm 13. So I love that, you're 13 and you're already thinking about money management and how you can be financially healthy, politically healthy, I hope spiritually, mentally, and physically healthy. That's great.
That's a good question. So, a good place to start when you're 13 is you can open it's called a paper account, or essentially just like a virtual account. So you can go on a lot of these websites like Fidelity, and they'll let you open essentially a fake account where you can buy and sell stocks on your own. But it's not real, obviously. It's just essentially, it's going to track. So if you really buy, like they'll give you, I'm making up a number, $20,000 of fake money. They'll allow you to buy $20,000 worth of stock. So you'll buy whatever, companies out there that you want to buy. And then you could practice right then and there. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say a good starting point is to just open an account and go for it. I would, everybody who's going to, the key difference is we're talking about individual stocks versus ETFs. When you're buying individual stocks, one, two, five stocks, you're taking a lot of risk because you're banking your entire balance on the performance of five companies. When you're buying a fund or like an ETF, like we discussed earlier, you're buying access to sometimes dozens or even hundreds of companies. So your money is going to move with the general market versus your money is going to move with just this four or five companies. Nonetheless, a good starting point is to open what I said, what's called a paper account, and just kind of play with it to see like how you buy, how you sell, how you research. Don't put any of your real money on the line. It's not worth it to get started, but it is worth it to learn at the age of 13. Thanks for signing in, by the way, at the age of 13.
Okay, so we'll move to the next section, and then Mary, I'll ask your question after this last section, so that we can keep track of time. And then from there, we'll answer more questions, and then we'll close out.
I do want to shout out I'm sorry, I'm going to say that, but he's saying, gold or silver is a good way to start as well. I agree. Precious metals. I know all the amtos and the moms out there would be like, I told you so for forever how long. But yeah, absolutely. Like precious metals is another easy way to invest. The thing with precious metals is essentially you're buying it and you're putting it to the side for a very, very long time. So it's almost like you truly have to forget it at that point. Um, you could also, yes, you could buy something that is, a much smaller, which is gold backs. All very good points. Inshallah, like I said, the purpose of this is just kind of introduce people to the idea of being very conscious with their money and how to be conscious with their money. But I totally agree. Gold, silver, always a good idea. And
Also,
yeah.
can you make sure to also talk about like what's legally allowed too, being that we are in a BDS state, an anti-BDS state? I think that's important to touch on as well.
I mean, so, okay, real quick, there's anti-BDS laws in about 36 out of the 50 states that we have. Anti-BDS is anti-boycott, divestment, and sanction. In our state of New Jersey, it's not super, I would say, it's not super enforced on a, state employee level, but it can be. What does that mean, right? Here's an example. There's a Japanese company that was, this is very recent. After the ICC came out and said Israel's committing a plausible genocide, this Japanese company did not want to be, subject to potentially being part of that lawsuit, so they withdrew all of their investments from Israel as a result. The state of New Jersey, as a consequence, said any of our investments in that Japanese company need to be gone because they have this anti-BDS law on the books. So on a personal level, how can it impact you? If you are a state employee or a federal employee, right, they can weaponize that against you. They have done it already in Texas, where if you remember a few years ago, there were floods that happened that really impacted the Texas area. And in order for the Texas residents, not even employees of the state, we're talking about normal, average Joe, anybody in the world that got impacted by this, horrible tragedy, in order for them to get FEMA funding or get like help from the government, basically from the federal government and the state government, they had to sign a document that basically pledges that they're not going to boycott Israel, which is a huge infringement on our First Amendment rights when it comes to our right to boycott. So that's something that you want to be aware of, although on a personal basis, like if you decide to buy and sell a stock on your own, there are no implications. If you're a state employee or a federal employee and you openly, state that, hey, I am boycotting Israel, and it could be weaponized against you because that's currently the laws on the books. But again, you can't go out there and just declare, or again, it's probably more important for business owners that submit, bids for contracts through the state. Like if you're a construction worker and you want to work on the Trenton building, and they know, for example, that you openly say, hey, I'm boycotting Israel, the state is legally required to withdraw that contract from you. Okay?
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
It sucks, but it is what it is.
That's crazy. No, but I wonder, is there a way, is there like term limits? I mean, I know like the way that in the state level, there are bonds that expire. For companies, like, would it just be like maybe you ask your company not to re-sign a contract that is existing when it comes to investing in a company that you don't want to invest in, or a stock that you don't want to invest in? Could you just be like, I would like for us to not re-sign or invest further as a means to get around? No,
I probably don't even understand fully the question, but for the purpose of just timing, we're right at the 9 minute the 9 o'clock mark, and I want to get through this last part, and it'll be the quickest. So
okay.
we'll get through that, and then we'll open it up to more questions
Okay.
towards the end. All right. All right. Weaponization of your wealth. So this is where, this is where you could really make an impact. And again, it's only one slide that kind of goes over the channels of also how to utilize your wealth. Because as much as, I want to tell you to invest in the right way to make money, to spend in the right way to save money, I also strongly advocate put money behind organizations that are doing really, really, really hard work and at really, really, really low prices. There is very little to no money in social causes and nonprofits. A lot of these companies, once you start to get intimately familiar with them, you'll realize that the work that they do versus the impact that they make, and with the shoestring budget that they have, is pretty phenomenal. But the thing that we can do and a lot of them are very, yeah, yeah. And again, this is obviously, I kept this towards the end because everybody knows their own personal situation and how much they can contribute. I'm not advocating for one organization or the other. I'm just telling you, like, you have to think in terms of, what builds the power that we need in order to overcome the obstacles that we're going through, right? The first one is media outlets. If anything, you have seen over the past, 2.5 years, how crappy of a job mainstream media has been doing to showing all the atrocities happening in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Yemen, in all these countries that are being bombarded by Israel, right? So I would suggest, these, few companies here. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are just some media outlets that I get my news from that helps me stay on top of everything. A lot of them have a free channel as well, so like you don't even need to contribute. They just tell you, hey, if you could give us $5 or $10 a month, that's great, and you become a subscriber. Advocacy organizations. Again, I work for AMP. A lot of people are familiar with CARE, the IMEU. These are, organizations that are, literally going to Washington, D.C., creating educational material to educate our elected officials about the things that we're going through as Muslims, as Arabs, as oppressed people that are constantly under, the threat of, the state, basically. So again, just make it a conscious effort to put money behind it. Now,
We could
again,
add Pac to that list as well.
we could add pack to that list too. I
Pac has
do
been to
not.
DC several times throughout the year.
uh, Absolutely, they do excellent work and they do a lot of events. I would
Civic
highly
engagement department,
recommend. Huh?
civic engagement department, growing interns. We could definitely throw Pac on that list too.
Absolutely. I did not by any means leave you guys off the list, but obviously this is a pack event, so I think it's very obvious that if there is an organization to support that's very local, also, right? You guys are right here in our backyard, so that's near and dear to us. Politics. Yeah. Listen, I can't stand politicians, but I also understand that they're tools that we have to use. So for the higher net worth individuals, maybe if you're a little bit more seasoned in your profession and you could really take the time to get behind individual candidates that are helping our causes, and if you don't want to take the time, effort, energy to learn about each individual, politician out there that you want to support, there's some, larger packs that you can kind of put money behind, and they would essentially put money behind those. So yesterday, again, it was a big election night also in Pennsylvania. Two really big pro-Palestine individuals won, which was amazing because, there were like coin tosses at best. And because, a lot of these organizations, put their endorsement and even put a little bit of money behind them, alhamdulillah, they made it to the finish line. And we still have some more coming up here in New Jersey that also could use your help as well. And then, as always, if anything, the charitable organizations, obviously, again, there's a lot out there. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I would say, and I'll say this like kind of not as a backhanded compliment, but I think this is one area that, mashallah, like our community does an overwhelmingly good job in. Meaning, like, we're very, very adamant about contributing to charitable organizations, which is essential. But I think you have to think in terms of like, hey, how much of my money is going to charitable organizations and how much of my money is going to go into politics? Because obviously, if you have $100 to spare a month, it's, you have to choose between you and yourself how much to put into each, category of what it is. But I will say, I think it's very incumbent on us to understand that as Muslims in the West, politics not only impacts us here, but it obviously also impacts people over there. So by alleviating them and by having the right policies here in the United States, these charitable organizations, I mean, I would love to live in a world where they're not necessary, obviously, because then we're in a really good place. But the reality is, we're spending a lot of money in this fourth column and very, very little money in the first three columns. And I think I just want to point that out to make sure people are aware of it and to think in a little bit different terms, because and this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying this as a, I know this for a fact, but I think when you spend money fi sabilillah, whether it's, through a charitable organization or fi sabilillah to help, an organization or an institution that does really good work, but obviously it's not, food and water and blankets, but it's advocacy and it's politics. I think it's, equally important to spend in those ways as well. Um, and with your wealth, these are how you add pressure points to everyone. Politicians, CEOs, they measure consumer behavior, and they measure our behavior as people in the world. Like, this is how they make their decisions. They get their data. The data says, uh, Muslim women respond to blah blah blah, so we're going to put money in that blah blah blah, whatever it is, right? So you have to be very conscious of these things, because they're watching you, for lack of a better word. So you should be very aware of where you put your money. And I'll stop there, because again, I just wanted to touch very briefly on that last point, because I think those are three different ways you could have real autonomy over, the blessings that you have, and the privilege that you have of living in safety and security here while people are under bombardment. And I'll open up the floor maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, Halima, roughly, to take us out if there's more questions. I know there was one question that I want to highlight, if that's okay. Maybe Mary put, if you want to sell off a long held bad investment, what's your advice to offset the gains, tax consequences, especially towards retirement age? Wow, that's very specific, Mary. That's like, expert level question right there. So yeah, look, the reality is, if you bought I'm going to use a very specific example. If you bought Apple stock back in the year 2000, and obviously it's done tremendous. It's like it's definitely more than 10x since the early 2000s. You bought it for $1,000. It's now worth $50,000, right? That $49,000 extra is called a taxable gain. So if you decide to divest and sell out of it, you're going to get hit with a pretty hefty tax bill. So the way you do that is something called tax loss harvesting. So hopefully your portfolio isn't just that one stock. But if you're going to sell $5,000 worth of gains, and you can find $5,000 worth of losses in your portfolio and sell both of them in the same year, that's called tax loss harvesting. You're washing out the gains with the losses. Okay? That's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do that I also suggest you consider is phasing it out. So what that means is, instead of taking all $50,000 in 1 year, maybe just do $5,000 to $10,000 a year for the next 5 or 10 years. Again, you have to consult and work with your accountant to make sure that it doesn't really negatively impact you tax wise. That way, you can be very methodical and ethical at the same time. Because I don't want to put you in a position where you're going to avoid being ethical because it's going to cost you too much, and nobody wants to pay extra taxes, that's for sure. Is there another question? I know we had a few more.
Thank you. No, we can open it back up to questions. That was the last question from the last round. And as of right now, there are no other questions. I do think that it would be good for us maybe to end in about 10 minutes, as there aren't many questions, because we know it's late and we want to be respectful of everybody's time, especially yours as well, because I know that you've had a long day. Um,
I want to watch
but
the Knicks game.
yeah, we appreciate your sacrifice. But you did, while we wait for a question, you did mention something to me the first time we talked about this, and that was, and this kind of goes back to the question that was asked, like, what can I do? Is what happened with Budweiser with the boycotts there, like, and it kind of shows how, like, how power really does formulate through this kind of mindfulness.
Yeah, I mean, look, that was all revolved around basically social pressure around LGBTQ, right? So if you remember, I think there was a commercial or I don't know if it was like, even just like an ad that was, it wasn't even like a full commercial, but it was with an influencer, and a lot of the times, if you step in the wrong direction when it comes to cultural issues that are very hot, right? It could start an upheaval. It could start a wave. Same thing happened with Target, right? And Target quickly, you know, reacted very quickly. Uh, but kind of like the damage is kind of done a little bit. Now, unfortunately, again, going back to like American cultural society and what is going to push their buttons. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say. Again, I think genocide has push them to at least pay attention to why is our government so controlled by a foreign country, and that pisses off a lot of people for that, which is fine. That's their red line, I guess. For a lot of other people it was, no, actually this is unethical and this is genocide, and that's my red line, and I won't vote for anyone or support a company that I know that is complicit in genocide. um, that's another great example. Yeah, McDonald's, Starbucks, a lot of those companies, they're suffering massively. They're unable to really kind of make up some of those losses that they're suffering just by being, pretty much on the boycott list. It's not even advertised that much. Like, at least when you looked at Target and when you looked at Budweiser, there was a lot of like right wing celebrity influencers kind of speaking out loudly about it, and it garnered a lot of attention. The McDonald's, the Starbucks, you're talking about protests in the street, completely organic online, a bunch of activists and social, just normal people. I mean, someone asked a question earlier, like, oh, what happens if it's just little old me, but these boycotts, these are not small things. They started organically, and they kind of took their own personality. And these companies don't know what to do. Like, they have absolutely no idea how to reverse their image. Neither do they want to, you know, say we don't stand with Israel, and that's gonna probably give them a different type of backlash. Nor are they're just stuck in this position where if it were up to them, they would want to be completely neutral if they can. But the problem is, we don't really live in a very neutral world. We want to know how these companies are gonna, treat people, and if they act in an ethical manner or not.
Yeah,
Um,
impact is damaging either their money or their reputation, and we do know that we can create mass change. I mean, look at how we've ended apartheid in South Africa, and a major part of that was due to the boycotts in the U.S. and the traction that gained. And so we do know that these things are possible. So I'm always very hopeful for the future that we can build, and I invest fully in my faith that as we watch things being destroyed as to what can be rebuilt. So and that's why we're not just talking about Starbucks and McDonald's on a what we spend personally, but really looking at the fact that we work in these large networks of people, and when we were working in like corporate America or with a union, and how it's that collective energy that we can really be tapping into, and really be the domino that creates that effective change, because we actually took the time to do something that maybe in our minds was so much bigger, but then after having this conversation we realized that really it just takes a little bit of personal accountability and maybe an hour of your day. and and here you are divesting way larger amounts than just $10 at McDonald's, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm really hopeful that we can continue to build on this collective power and and create mass shifts in the market and start to invest in things that create rather than destroy. I don't see any other questions. As we come to an end to today's program, I just want to thank you a lot for sharing your experience, your expertise, and your insight with us. Today, we explored ethical investing, consumer influence through boycotting, and the role of supporting advocacy groups in shaping economic and social outcomes. We encourage everyone to continue these conversations beyond today within your communities, your networks, and your personal finance decisions. But before we close, we'd like to share ways to stay engaged, including upcoming events and opportunities to get involved in. Earlier in the chat, and we'll bump it again, we released an interest form. It's a brief Google form that you can fill out if you would like to personally connect with Alae, who is, it just really speaks to your dedication, that you're really going above and beyond here, beyond just this conversation, but your willingness to connect with others one-on-one. And you can ask Alae questions and hopefully, Alae help me personally walk me through how I can um, make sure that I'm not investing in anything that I don't want to be invested in. Uh, and so we'll drop that into the chat again for the interest form. And then just two other quick plugs. One is at PAC, and I believe AMP is are a part of a coalition called Break the Bonds New Jersey, that is focused on how we can control our money at the state level and the bonds in which we are connected to at the state level. Would love for everybody on this call to sign the petition, join our campaign. We are working on divesting the state's money from Palantir and making sure that the state no longer invests in contracts with international bonds that are connected to apartheid and humanitarian issues. There's a lot that we're doing on this campaign. It's really good work, and it really is going to take people power. I say this all the time. New Jersey is a part of the tri-state. The tri-state is where the global economy is. And there is a lot of power in proximity in this small state. So there's a lot of change that we can create globally if we are able to break ourselves free from the constant hustle and bustle of living in a state like New Jersey and just take some time and prioritize this as a means of health, our financial health, political health, spiritual health, mental health, physical health. All of it takes consistency and small efforts. So please join this campaign. And then lastly, so excited to share with you our events for Palestine Week coming up in June. In June 4th, we'll be doing an event where we'll be discussing, talking to local elected officials or previously elected officials and organizers who work in the Muslim Arab community space, and what our experiences have been like on the back end as organizers, really looking to also reshape our political landscape for those of us who are living in the diaspora and fighting for liberation, and continue building these bridges between community and organizers. And then we have our flag raisings on June 5th and June 6th for the Palestinian flag raising in Patterson and in Clifton. The link is dropped below for you to see the full spectrum of events. We also have a really great film screening coming up to see Palestine 36. This is a great event for you to be inviting your broader, larger community. This is a way for Palestinians living in the diaspora to continue connecting to our history from the perspective of our own historians, and then also inviting other people to really see our truth as well. So come one, come all, and always bring a friend. And please, stay tuned for any events that we have coming up at PAC. Thank you a lot again for this wonderful conversation. And if you have any other plugs, feel free to add them in, and then we'll say goodnight.
No, thank you so much, Hanima, for giving me the platform to go over. Like I said, it's It's not just my profession. I genuinely believe and have conviction that we have a lot of accountability, and this is one very easy way we could take accountability daily. So thank you so much for the time. I don't have any plugs. I put it all out, I put it all out there.
Oh, Yafik. Thank you. Okay. And we'll say good night. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And please fill out that form if you'd like to connect with Alae on a one-on-one level. Sign the Break the Bonds petition and check out our events that we have coming up for Palestine Week in June. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
for your questions. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being invested in this. Thank you.